in act, and it's something that we should continue with. Let's move on to sustainable finance. Some of the tools that we have that help us with our sustainable finance in Europe, we can count on a very powerful instrument, a very powerful tool, which in Italy has provided millions of euros, and we're talking about the European Investment Bank, which acts also with sustainable investments, so impact bonds that don't only provide a yield, perform well, but that also impact our societies and our environment. So we have with us here today Dario Scannapieco, the Vice President of the EIB, and he has been confirmed as Vice President, so I'd like to call him to the podium to give his keynote address. Well, I would like to thank San Patrignano, Confindustria, and all the other organizers for this wonderful event, because they give me the opportunity to come to know a reality that is made up of so many elements and has so much in common with Europe. I was listening to President Moratti earlier, and I was listening to the values behind San Patrignano, and I was thinking that we have a lot in common with Europe. When Europe was created in 1957, it was based on two important concepts of community and of solidarity. These are two concepts which, in my opinion, are still very present here today. Solidarity comes from the Latin solidus, which means strong, cohesive. And the idea is that there is a body in which everyone works together and stands together. No one is left behind. Everyone is part of the same entity, and that was the idea of the founding fathers of the European Union, and it is linked to the idea of standing together, of creating a community. And from this perspective, I was actually thinking about how a society, for it to be solid and sound, it needs to provide solidarity. And I think that is something that we are now losing in Europe, something to reflect on. And one of the reasons also why I'm here today, because I can also give you this food for thought to think to why the EU was originally established and set up, because solidarity, the concept of solidarity, seems to be losing foothold. The EIB was therefore created according to the Treaty of Rome in 1958 on Italian impulse. It was created as a tool to support the development of the European economy and its social cohesion. Italy was worried because there were regions in Italy that had remained behind, that were lagging behind. And in particular, compared to what had been envisaged in the Treaty of Rome. So this harmonious growth, no region would ever be left behind again. That was what was envisaged. So the idea was to create this support mechanism for growth and for the economy, especially for those regions that were not as strong. So sustainability, transparency, impact are all concepts that guide our work every single day. The original mission of the EIB was to contribute to a balanced development of the internal market in order to improve people's lives, the lives of European citizens. Over the years, new global challenges have arisen, such as the fight against climate change, finding our response to mass migration, and contributing to the achievement of the UN's SDGs. And it is for this reason that it is increasingly important that as a public institution, EIB, because we see all our member states as investors, and they support our projects. So as a public institution, we ask that our projects meet ambitious and strict environmental and social standards for a smart, sustainable, and inclusive growth. Our methods focus primarily on an appraisal, a responsible appraisal, and also monitoring of projects through a continuous monitoring mechanism, which goes beyond mere disbursement of funds for projects, because in this way we are guaranteeing for citizens the fact that resources are used in a responsible manner. EIB always says that we're not just a financial institution. We have about 400, 500 investors and economic experts working for us. It's not just about money. It's about something else. And our assessment of compliance with sustainability parameters requires an analysis also of the compliance with procurement procedures, of the environmental impact, of the respect of the rights of all those involved in our projects. Think of workers, for example. When a bridge is built, when the bridge here in Italy, for example, was built, there were communities living underneath the area where the bridge was going to be built. So the idea was to resettle these residents, these people in other areas. Because that is what needs to be done. That is what needs to be done when we manage public resources, when we are a public institution. And what we do is also to see if public resources are used appropriately and to measure those costs and those benefits and to see that it benefits the whole of society and that we're acting in a responsible manner in the interests of all our taxpayers. We must not forget that we are a public institution and that we are acting in the interests of the community. And that is why we strive to maintain an exemplary conduct in terms of transparency, because transparency shows that we can have good administration, that we can be effective in pursuing our objectives. It also helps us to create a sound system of widespread control. For example, we provide a public register which can be freely consulted online on our website. And through this register, we provide all the information related to the social, environmental due diligence of each project that we evaluate. We also have a complaint mechanism through which the public can actually formally raise doubts about any of the projects of the EIB group. In this way, this dialogue that is set up with citizens allows us to look at the concerns of citizens, and it therefore reduces the gap, and this is very important, the gap between institutions and people. This is a very important issue at this moment, more now than ever before. As for impact, we focus on projects where our participation can mobilize public and private institutions. We endeavor to facilitate the economic and social development of our continent and the entire world. One of the priorities, in fact, of the bank is to fight climate change. We heard this earlier from the president of the region of Emilia-Romagna and all the projects they have undertaken. This means that we are going to better the lives of the generations of today and of tomorrow. Since 2007, we have issued 23.5 billion euros in green bonds, which is a product that focuses solely on environmental projects. We are still the world's leading issuer of environmental bonds, and thanks to this tool, in 2018, we dedicated 30% of our funding volumes to projects against climate change. Bear in mind that the EIB, for 80% of its work, operates here in Europe, and for the remaining 20% operates outside of Europe. So this small percentage of projects which have an impact on climate change. So we're talking about investments in renewables, in innovative products, renewable energies, energy efficiency. So all of these investments to fight climate change, to mitigate the effect of climate change. So when we operate outside the European Union, we also seek to promote the values and the standards of the EU, all the while ensuring that the living conditions of the people involved are improved and that there is compliance with the environmental and social standards. I'm following a program of the EIB closely, personally. It is a project that is very important to me, and it is the The Red to Dead Sea project, Red to Dead Sea Corridor project. It's a scheme, a project involving Jordan and Israel, and it involves the construction of water infrastructure and desalination plants and facilities in Jordan that will provide fresh water in southern Israel and transfer salty water from the Red Sea to the Dead Sea to mitigate the drying out of the Dead Sea. Jordan is ranked second in terms of water scarcity. So Israel is providing water to northern Jordan in this way. And in this way, we are guaranteeing drinking water in northern Jordan, where there is the highest number of refugees. So this project, which has a significant environmental and social impact, but also a geopolitical one, is truly impressive, and that's why it's important that Europe be a part of it. We have dedicated 260 million euros out of a total of more than 1 billion to this project. And this brings me now to another high-impact area, economic resilience. In 2016, the European Investment Bank launched the Economic Resilience Initiative. This is a tool that will strengthen the provision of basic services and support the private sector in the countries of our so-called southern neighbors and in the Western Balkans. The idea is to help these countries absorb shocks and respond to crises in a positive way, while at the same time maintaining growth and employment rates. We have about 2 million refugees living in these regions, so economic resilience can actually have an impact on the management of migration flows and encourage the transition to a safer and dignified form of migration. Since 2016, as part of this initiative, we've financed about 43 projects in 11 countries for a total of 4.3 billion out of the expected 6 billion euros by 2021. So the idea is also to invest a further about 7 billion euros and reach about 25 billion total. All of this to improve the impact for these peoples in these regions. And thanks to the resources that have been allocated so far, we've reached about 3,000 local SMEs, which employ more than 160,000 people. Take, for example, the creation of women's microcredit funds in Jordan, or the creation of 3 new industrial zones in Lebanon. And our loans have improved also hygiene and healthcare conditions for 6 million inhabitants, and they've contributed to the production of electricity for 16,000 families. And again, together with various NGOs, we are studying the feasibility of a financial tool that will actually encourage the labor inclusion of refugees in Italy. We're also active in promoting women in the economy, something that we also heard from the president of the Emilia-Romagna region. And according to the European Institute for Gender Equality, studies have shown that improving female employment would actually contribute to an increase in GDP per capita in the European Union of about 6.1 to 9.6%. In general, if we reduce gender inequalities, then we can actually guarantee faster economic development. So the EIB has granted UniCredit a 200 million loan for SMEs, at least 25% of which is dedicated to supporting companies run or owned by women. This is an excellent example of the work that we're doing with the private sector and schemes that we're replicating in Romania, in Greece, and in Ethiopia, and it always means that we are really committed to what we are doing as a bank. We also, though, are involved in fighting climate change. We are strongly committed to this fight, but we've also undertaken the social fight. There used to be a dichotomy between return for social investments or just investments, and also the social impact. These now need to be married, and they actually they're being aligned because of the great social impact that investments can have. The European Investment Fund is very present in all of this. The EIF is a subsidiary of the European Central Bank, and it focuses on providing guarantees in venture capital and private equity funds. So in terms of social impact, EIF has created a social impact accelerator, which amounts to about 253 million and has thus far invested in about 10 funds dedicated to social work here in Italy. And we've also seen that the management team hasn't focused on the economic return, but rather on the impact of this scheme. Together with CDP, we created Social Impact Italy, dedicated to a number of tools. We have about 50 million coming from us and about 50 million from CDP. The idea is to support, again, through guarantee funds, social impact projects. The idea is also to give an incentive to banks to focus on the social area. In conclusion, I'm convinced that the EIB has contributed to defining new economic standards, social standards for the validation of projects, but also new ethical standards. If I think, for example, of our policies against money laundering, against the support for terrorism, fraud, and all of this puts us ahead at the forefront of all multilateral financial institutions. The idea is to develop greater awareness of the sustainable use of public resources. I gave you an example of a project in Jordan. In Italy, we've done many similar projects. We have invested in the water infrastructure of the country, in energy efficiency. Together with Enel, we have worked to create, or rather to install, the power banks for motor cars, so for hybrids or electric cars. So we're really focusing on creating a circular economy. And often what I try to explain is that Europe is not an abstract concept. When you see these projects, we want to give you the idea of a Europe that is close to you, that stands by the citizens. And we do this bearing in mind that what we do is important, and we want to support those projects to have a true impact on the lives of our citizens. The EIB sees Europe in this light. We stand on the same side as promoters. We want to give answers to shared problems. So we want to move towards a more sustainable society. Thank you very much.